how do I take it from a burden to a blessing in many, many ways? And that's the premise of like your big next is not just 10x for the sake of 10x. It is about exponential growth. It is about like, what are the key high leverage things that you can be doing to shift out of the slow incremental grind into the glide?
Well, welcome to the podcast, Liz.
Thanks for having me, Brad. I'm excited to be with you.
Yeah, I'm super excited. So we were introduced by Tara Dunn, and she's like, Brad, you have to have Liz on. She's phenomenal. She's incredible. And truth be told, and preparing to have you on, this is Liz Hartke, and you are the founder of Luminary Leadership. You're also an author and fellow podcaster. I know it's the big next. Your big next is what you just rebranded the podcast. I did a rebrand with my podcast, so I get it. And your book's coming out, Your Big Next. And in preparing for this episode, it's pretty amazing to see what you're doing, for so many different entrepreneurs. So it's very exciting.
Thanks. Yeah, Tara is like the ultimate connector, and anyone that she says, you got to connect with this person, she's usually spot on.
It's funny how probably you and I align that way, where like you meet connectors, maybe you consider yourself a connector in a way. The power of connection, like it's real, when you meet other CEOs, executives, entrepreneurs, people that are looking to, I don't want to say leave a legacy, but they're trying to do what they can to, bring value to whatever industry they're in.
Yeah. Yep. And I think the old school networking is kind of a thing of a past, and deep relationships and meaningful connection is really where it's at when it comes to growth and prosperity and possibility and just quality of life as an entrepreneur, like actually having friends and people you can lean on and turn to as you navigate the craziness of growing a business.
It's really hard. I'll say being an entrepreneur, it can be lonely. And do you feel that maybe a unique perspective you have is, through the connections that you can, in a way, kind of bring culture, a group of leaders together? I know that you also do these like CEO leadership, I think it's like a 9-month program, if I'm not mistaken, that you do these retreats, if you will. And
Yep.
I know that, I've been involved in some of those, and there's unique power. Speak to like the power of these retreats where, just whether it's people able to evaluate their business and get feedback right away, that community that so many of us aspire to have that we probably don't have, on our lonely island as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I've been running masterminds for about 12 years, and they've been hugely beneficial to me in my business. When I first joined one, I was at that point where I was beating my head against a 250K ceiling for years. It was driving me bonkers. I couldn't figure it out, and I was grasping at every possible strategy. And I'm pretty introverted by nature. I love being around people. I love connecting with people. I love deep relationships, but in terms of where I regain my energy, like it's usually on my own. And so when one of my friends said, "Oh, you need to join a mastermind," I was like, "You're crazy. Like, I'm not paying for friends. I'm not," I had such a misconception about what it was about. But what it did was, in such a fraction of time that I had been trying to like slog my way through this growth, I was able to see reflected back to me things that I just couldn't see when I was alone in my office trying to problem solve, writing on a whiteboard, pushing through the hard stages of business. And one of the biggest things I saw was that I was my own biggest bottleneck in the growth I was trying to have. And the other thing is it's okay. So when you picture how you're growing your business on your own or running your business on your own, you are trying to manufacture these opportunities, right? You're trying to get doors to open. You're trying to get certain strategies to work or learn how to do things or reduce the competency gap when you don't know how to do something in specific in your business that it's time for, whether it's marketing or whatever, sales strategy. And then all of a sudden you're put in a room with however many, 20 other people who have all these different competencies that, huge range, different, runs the gamut, that you don't have, that you now have access to, who are now personally invested in you as a person. So the speed at which you break through some of those walls that I had personally been facing for years is just mind blowing. So my first mastermind, within the first few months of it, I went from this 250K ceiling that I'd been stuck at, and broke into my first 7-figure year and have
Mm.
grown year after year since then. But I think the bigger thing for me was I would get in these rooms and I loved so many elements about the masterminds that I was in, but each one I'd like glean the wisdom or the good from it, but each one was missing something for me. And for me, I'm a very values driven person. So if I enter into a program where the leader is brilliant, great at business, but they treat their spouse like crap, or their kids hardly know them, or they believe it's all on their back and they have no semblance of any faith whatsoever, I have a hard time just really feeling at home there. So I wanted to create a space where really successful entrepreneurs could come and let their guard down and feel safe and not feel like they have to be in this room where they're just all puffing their chest, like comparing notes that no one actually grows because no one's willing to admit where they're struggling, and create these spaces where we can accelerate growth, but doing it primarily in scaling the leader first, unlocking the leader, so that the byproduct of that is a business that scales sustainably versus one that like you have these massive peaks and valleys because you're just grasping at strategies. That was a long-winded answer, but I'm very passionate about this because it was.
No, it's incredible. I actually want to table this for a minute. I was making some notes, and you mentioned the value, the values of that person, that vulnerability of being, around people that probably share the same values and being open to that exposure in a way. That's the only way to really grow. But you mentioned that, you realized you're your biggest bottleneck, and you said I
Oh,
was
yeah.
hitting the ceiling at 250K, and I escalate. I was able to get past that to the next level. What was there a tipping point? Was there something specific? I mean, what allowed you to kind of see that I am the bottleneck? Just truth be told, I've been the bottleneck in my company, so I totally can relate to that in so many ways. You don't realize you are, but you are as you kind of as you're exposed to a network of professionals and entrepreneurs. How did that change your business to escalate, not just from revenue, but probably from, lifestyle and happiness and, flexibility in some ways?
Yeah, I think when you're in the right spaces, you're going to meet people that love you enough to be honest with you. And that was a blessing I had early in my career. Was I had mentors who loved me enough and believed in me enough to say the things that I probably didn't want to hear at the time, and that my ego needed to be like put in check a little bit so that I could actually see the blind spots that were holding me back. And sometimes it was as simple as like, I'm a very all gas, no brakes person by nature. So like 3 on the Enneagram or high D on the disc, whatever profile you want to look at, I'm the type that can have a propensity for overworking, for just hitting a goal and setting the next goal and just like glossing right over it. And all of a sudden I had these people in the room asking me, well, what matters most to you in your life? Or what do you want this business to be for your family? Or what does your family want from you and the business that you're building? And they were just requiring me to be honest to the value system I was paying lip service to. So then when I would go on my next quest of whatever goal I was pushing towards, they could say something as simple as like, Liz, have you considered what that means for your family, the repercussions for your family? Like when I was in a stage where I was speaking a lot more frequently, I have 4 little kids. Um, I'm pregnant with another baby. Like I was on the road earlier in my career. And then I was saying out of one side of my mouth, like, yeah, my family's the most important thing. And I want to be present mom and I want to be there to raise our kids and we're going to homeschool and like all these things. And then out of the other side of my mouth, there was a complete lack of congruency because I'm like, well, my big goal this year is to get on this many stages. And they're like, have you considered how that connects? So you just have these people that are like reflecting truth back to you and asking you the questions that sometimes we just like can't see the label from inside the bottle and we don't even think to ask ourselves. And then the other thing is I might come to the table with the strategy that I think works, but there's someone else in the room, maybe even in a different industry, who has done it 10 times better and 10 times faster or made like really epic mistakes that they've learned from. And I get to get all of the value out of their mistakes and their journey without ever having to have paid the price they just paid because they're willing to like gift me that perspective. So there are just so many different angles, but like to me, it's how do we stay rooted in who we're really called to be as we proceed, right? Like I say a lot that how you build the thing is as important as the thing you build, right? Like we're also focused on the thing we're building, but we're not paying enough attention or giving enough weight to like what the journey there looks like. And those types of rooms and those circles, if they're the right ones, will really hold you accountable to who you need to be in order to live out the life you're called to live in all areas of your life.
And I think that's a profound statement. I mean, how you close that, and you made this analogy of you can't see the label inside the bottle. I thought that's
Mhm.
pretty fascinating. I found that, for me, how that applies to me, I'm we build custom homes, right? We do some commercial, mostly residential. And too many times over the years, I've spent money or paid clients to build their houses, right? And it's not really a good strategy to stay in business. But you mentioned these aha moments as you're around other people that are a little bit more honest and, vulnerable in a way that you're like, hey, I don't need to make the same mistake. And what I've realized throughout my career, the power of these networking events and retreats and conferences and being around like-minded individuals is that, there is something to be said about confidence, right? Like you stand behind there, Liz, I'm sure today in business, you're a lot more confident in everything you do because of your experience, your network, these relationships that are so powerful to you. And because of that, you can stand in front of a ideal client or potential customer, or and you can speak with confidence, and you realize that confidence of understanding your business and your format and you as a leader of your family. I mean, it goes a long way to now lead you to the next level to be prepared for that next opportunity that may present itself.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so for you, I mean, something that's unique. I mean, you mentioned that as you had these goals about public speaking, and on your website, you said you could be an entrepreneur, a family in tow. And speak to us about just how it can be overwhelming running the business. It can be overwhelming, having kids. I have 6 kids myself, so I know what it's like to have a big family and run a business. Um, After you had these goals of all these, opportunities to public speak, and then now you're kind of being pushed back, like, well, do you really represent that, Liz? How have you found a way to maneuver between the business side of your career and the family side of your career?
Yeah, I'd say it's been one of the most worthy challenges yet. I I feel like I can speak to it because I've gotten it wrong and, like, now I'm on the other side of some mistakes. But for me, I had to abandon this illusion of balance and seek integration. And what I mean by that is, so I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs. Both of my parents ran their own businesses independently, and my mom still is in business today and has her own practice. My grandfather had his own legal practice. My uncle is a chiropractor, and I worked in each of those small businesses throughout my childhood. But I also would just kind of be along for the ride, because when you have parents that are working full time to provide for your family and they have client appointments or they have things they have to go to, like, you're in tow. And that was my childhood. And I have so many vivid memories being a kid and, my mom would be at everything. Like, she was homeroom mom, she was driving my friends places, like, we were the house where the kids hung out. She was at every ball practice, she was there to bring popsicles when it was, like, really hot after practice, like, things like that. She never missed a thing. She was always cooking a homemade meal, but she also was the breadwinner of our family. And I have memories of just waking up at, whatever, midnight as a little kid to go use the bathroom or something, and, like, waddling down the hall and seeing the dining room light on, like, dimmed at, like, midnight, 1 AM, and there's my mom, briefcase open, like, all her papers kinda strewn across the table. And that was just standard. Like, she didn't ever want to give up motherhood or the elements of motherhood, and connection with us, to just grow her career. So she had to figure out, how do these two worlds collide and become one? Because she was the common denominator. So we were just very much a part of the puzzle. And some of my greatest lessons in my life were because I could overhear a conversation she was having with a client going through a tough time and how she communicated with them, or how my grandfather, navigated someone that was really in need and, like, gave extra of himself beyond his call of duty, right, as a lawyer. And just, I absorbed that like a sponge, and it just became a piece of my DNA, something I totally took for granted until a lot later in life when I was reflecting back and being like, "Oh, I don't think this was normal that I got to experience that and that I was led by such incredible people. So the way that we viewed it as a family is like our business is a classroom now, right? We homeschool our kids. We're not real formal about it. We tried the curriculum thing and then just realized our kids are a bunch of entrepreneurial, at least entrepreneurial minded themselves, and they want to like lean into their bent and do what they're passionate about. And a lot of times they're coming alongside us. Like when we just hosted one of our 3 mastermind events that falls in that 9-month duration, and we hosted at our home very much on purpose. Like we want our clients to come into our home and experience our chaos and our circus. And we want to break bread with them around our dining room table. And we want our kids to bear witness to like all of these entrepreneurs who have put it on the line for their families and have leaned into the sacrifice, but the awesome opportunity that running a small business is. And we want them to be woven into that world and understand what it looks like. So the thing I had to let go of, Brad, was aesthetics. Like it is messy when you choose to do that. And I think the broken side of like social media and whatever is that it paints this really pretty picture of what it looks like when you whatever decide to homeschool and have your kids around, and what it's all BS. It's like you forget that influencer set up a camera and made their kid pose 50 different ways over the last 3 hours. If I had a camera on every minute of my life, people would be like, "I'm watching because it's a train wreck and I can't look away." Like just because any one of my kids could come busting through this door right now. So I think that's the beauty of it, though, is like we're all learning together and we're learning how to integrate these worlds, and we're not trying to keep these strict boundaries between like these are my business hours and these are my family. It's like it just melds together, it blends, and it's a blessing for all of us. There's learning in it for all of us, and my kids get the benefit that I had of like watching what it means to take that risk, to put it all on the line for your family and do something independent of the machine over here, and do something that really matters.
You're super brave. I'm gonna speak to why. I mean, I love this, Liz. The funny comment about, if a camera's following you around, there's this short little documentary that they're doing on AFT and myself and stuff. And it was funny because when they're filming around my kids are like, we don't like when the cameras are here because we can't fight as much. And
Yeah.
it's like, and the reality is, I'm like, well, maybe they should be here more often. But the reality is, like, my life, you think like the song 311, Beautiful Disaster, be like, this is like a disaster. Like,
Yeah.
between work and I mean, yeah, we don't need everyone to see the chaos that runs through it. But what's interesting is, I think times have changed in this way, Liz. Is that for so long, probably you and I are our age, and that generation where you're ingrained that you have to go to school, you have to do great on your tests, you have to go to college, right? And you're realizing that no one's teaching entrepreneurship, no one's teaching business leadership. The value of you being young and having these examples in your life, it allows you to pivot into an entrepreneur, bringing your kids along. There's so much more value to that. I see, just specifically as it relates to my industry, you know, the youth now, like if school's not your thing, I mean, to go into the trades and learn a skill where you're making great money, like out of high school, and you can go perform and, and then become a journeyman and own your own business. But the problem is, even in construction, is that whether you're really skilled at maybe being a framer, trim carpenter, concrete, you don't know how to run a business. And so
Right.
if they've had that upbringing like you've had, or you're giving this benefit to your kids to understand entrepreneurship and business and communication and networking, how much farther are they, like, and I think a lot of people may, and maybe you could speak to this, maybe judge in a way, but the reality is, anyone that's been through this, like you and I, like the value you're giving your kids, and now you can balance that family and work. And I mean, I just commend you. I mean, it's truly exceptional that your kids are being exposed to this at such a young age.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm being so genuine when I say like we figure it out every day. Like the heart of why we're doing it, my husband and I have gotten good at making decisions not just based on how it feels in the moment, but like what we're creating for the future. So when we think about our future as husband and wife, like we picture, we bought this property here in New Hampshire, and we picture like grandkids coming back here and our kids being around and Sunday dinners, like all the things that I had growing up with my extended family. But then I have to backtrack and I have to say, okay, in order for that to be my reality, like in order for my grandkids to be sitting on my lap every week, I get to see them and I get to do life with them and I get to be in great relationship with my kids, what seeds am I planting today? And so there are a lot of things that come with the lifestyle we've chosen that are massively sacrificial. Like there are a lot of people that I've talked to and my friends, their kids are in school from whatever, like 8 to 3. And I'm like, you have a house with no kids in it for that many, like that, you know what kind of luxury that is? Like you get
Yeah.
to clean something and then it doesn't get uncleaned in
Yeah,
30
right.
seconds, or it's quiet and your nervous system isn't on like high alert at all times. So like there are sacrifices that come with it, but you kind of have to weigh what you really want. And we've done that. And this lifestyle, as crazy as it is, because I have had, mentors or friends or whatever, we open our home a lot. And you can just tell they're like, wow, you guys do this every day, huh? And we're like, yeah. But it's so incredible watching how our kids are flourishing in it, because my son, our oldest, he's actually turns 10 tomorrow. And he is so brilliant. And he's just like his dad. He has such a passion for like, he's such an engineering brain, like he can look at something and just see how it will be created and then literally go out to the workshop. He's been using power tools since he was like 6 and just goes out there and he just builds it. He measures it. He cuts the wood. He fine tunes it. He has to iterate it because it didn't work the first time. And he creates all these things. If he were in a traditional system and he didn't get to be around us who are like, know his heartbeat and really are trying to cultivate the things that he's most passionate and gifted with and what makes him come alive, he'd be the kid that like is labeled ADD or is told they have an IEP or something because he doesn't learn in a really traditional way. So it's like you have to choose. People say it all the time. You have to choose your hard. Like we're choosing the hard that's going to yield the fruit that we want into the future, because that's what really matters to us.
It's incredible. Do you feel, I mean, your kids are fairly young, at 10 and underneath.
Mm-hmm.
What have you seen as a parent, from either leadership or confidence, from them, the exposure they've had to what you and your husband are doing?
Mm-hmm. I think so there was a book that really struck me. It's called Hold On to Your Kids, and it's very like data backed. And the premise is super simple though. It's like life is a numbers game. So there comes a point where like back before the industrial era, kids were alongside their parents and their
Hmm.
siblings all day, every day. They ran the family business, they ran the farm, like whatever it was, they were together. And then post industrial, and now even more so as kids are super involved in a billion activities and whatever, like I was as a kid. Um, it's just a simple numbers game that the amount of influence that you have on your kids from an hour's perspective is reduced dramatically because they're at
Hmm.
school and then they go to activities. So you can be the most value driven, attentive parents, but when you only get 2, maybe 3 hours with your kids, and it's usually packed with like homework and sports and eat this, take a bath, go to bed kind of energy, your influence is being diminished. So I think for us, the big thing is that we're present. Like I work full time, like I run my business full time, but there are a lot of times where my kids are in and out and they're watching and they're a part of different things. Like I have, my husband will take the kids when I'm doing podcasts and things like that. Cause there are certain things like having kids screaming in the
Right.
background would be a little
Yeah.
bit annoying for the person hosting the show. But there are many things that they're like hearing me converse with my clients, or they're in the room when we're hosting an event, or they're seeing me speak, or they're hearing me record a podcast, or watching us tweak things as we develop operations in our business. And we're just there throughout the whole day to have these little touch points of like, hey, did you see how we did that? Or did you hear how that person reacted that way? Like, that's not how you want to handle a hard conversation. Like, this is something you might want to consider. So we're just scaffolding them a little bit more because we have
Mhm.
that time. It was in our favor. And because of that, we notice them implementing so many of the things that they see and that they experience with us, just simply because they're steeped in it. It's not this intentional thing. We're like, okay, today, kids, we're going to learn entrepreneurship and mom is going to be doing this in the business. And no, it's just happening. And they're just witnessing it and they're not thinking about it the same way. If you grew up on a farm, your parents probably didn't sit you down a couple days a week and talk about farming. You just like got muddy and did the farming. It's very
Mhm.
similar in how we run the show here, and it's not even really all that intentional. Sometimes it's just how we have to live our lives. And as a result, I see our kids bringing forth a lot of those values or ways of thinking, or even how they treat each other. I know my kids, like, I was in negotiations for like 3 months with this big business opportunity and partnership. And a lot of times my kids would be within earshot, and I hear my son using some of the negotiation phrases on others to like get something out of them. I'm like, he does listen. He is paying
Yeah.
attention. So it's just kind of like you're just doing life together, and as a result, you see these little cool moments where you're like, wow, it actually is affecting them. Like that is influencing them, even though we weren't necessarily like intentionally trying to get that to stick.
Yeah, well, there's a sponge effect, right? And little kids are sponges. They're gonna pick up on everything, especially how you communicate. Tying back to earlier, you mentioned that, something that really was important to you was finding leaders and entrepreneurs and those in your network that had the same values. Do
Yeah.
you find now, as you've built Luminary Leadership, that people are attracted to you, and networking with you and kind of what you've cultivated because of your closeness with your husband, with your children? Do they have children? How has that family played a role in, I don't want to say the recruitment, but in the community that you built?
Yeah. Yeah, it's supernatural, like, it just happens, and it's been really neat because I remember my early stages of business going to my husband or going to my team being like, "Oh, I'm so sick of working with this person," and, like, we would just attract anyone that whose money was green and was willing to pay us for, like, whatever strategy we were implementing in their business, and now, coming off the heels of this event that we just hosted at our home, which we've been doing for 12 years, multiple times a year, every time I come off, even as an introvert, like fueled, I'm like, I love these people. Like, I love them. I love their families. I love what they stand for. And I love this work. And it's such a stark contrast from how it used to be. So, yes, we notice that we naturally magnetize people that are family oriented. I'm like, I'm not checking like what religion are you? I just like when I say faith, it's very hard for me to coach anybody
Right.
who genuinely believes that everything is 100% on their back. Like, you have to have some level of belief that you are being guided. Otherwise, I can only take you so far because to me, that's the linchpin. It's like, good news, it's not all on you.
Mhm.
So that element's important. Or just how you treat people. Like there's a lot of talk about boundaries and this and that in the culture today. And I'm all for it. I think there are appropriate points for it. But like, I believe in humanity. I'm like, if someone is really hurting or in need or going through something terrible and you pull up a contract in response to their hurt, like, I don't want to work with those kind of people. I'm not saying you let yourself get walked on but like you be a human and you have conversations and you care about the people you work with. So that's been really neat because it's really repelled a lot of people who are like, I'm just here for the bottom line. Give me the next strategy. Um, you know, I'm the type of mom that is gonna the way I'm gonna influence my kids is I'm gonna go follow my dreams and they're gonna be inspired. I'm like, no, they're not. They're gonna be in therapy. Like, I want to work with the people who are like, how do I take this business that was intended to be impactful and incredible for freedom and family, but now is kind of coming at the detriment of it because that's super common. Like, it's common once we find success, right? Because now we have something to manage and keep alive and pay the bills and all of that. How do I take it from a burden to a blessing in many, many ways? And that's the premise of like your big next is not just 10x for the sake of 10x. It is about exponential growth. It is about like, what are the key high leverage things that you can be doing to shift out of the slow incremental grind into the glide, right? Like into this exponential growth, but it's in alignment with who God's calling you to be. It's in alignment with the values that matter most. It's in consideration of your spouse and your family. It's in alignment with what you're like intuitively called to do versus what the world is telling you to do. So that does repel a lot of people, and it's been great because it also brings in the perfect clients who are like, yeah, I'm ready for that. Like, show me the way. And so it's been awesome because we like love our work so much more these days ever since we've been a little bit more bold in that.
Well, it's funny because there's Morgan Molitor. She's a friend of mine in Minnesota, and she often says that your vibe attracts your tribe.
Mhm.
So there's a sense of that as you were speaking. It just made me think of like her philosophy that there is true, like, as you've built your business, you start to attract those that probably share similar values as and really align. How do you deal with burnout? Because, I would imagine there's even in your role, there's probably days where maybe, with kids and business that it could be overwhelming, if not for you, for sure, those that you're mentoring and, working with may deal with that. How do you navigate, just the long hours, the emotional side of being an entrepreneur and, try to balance everything that we have?
So, yep, burnout's really common. I have faced it myself many a time. And usually I'm getting introduced to people right at that tipping point where they feel like I'm about to lose it. Like they're at max capacity because they've experienced the S curve of business, right? Like the early stage problems that they were once facing are a thing of the past where they were nobody knew them. And now they have clients to fulfill on and team to pay and, operations to create and like all the things. And because of that, it takes them out of their sweet spot and what they're passionate about and what they're gifted at and into maintaining what is with this dream of growing. And there's a massive disconnect. They're like, I'm working my tail off. I work all the time. I'm called to something greater, like meaning I know there's more expansion for me, but I can't for the life of me figure out how to make it come to fruition because I'm just surviving, keeping the lights on. Like I have to do all these things to keep the ship afloat. So that's where I meet people on the cusp of burnout. One of the things that I've been incredibly passionate about is I love leadership, hence the name of my company, but I also have seen the detriment of how leadership has been taught in years past, where it's so esoteric, it's so conceptual, it's so philosophical. And if I were to sit with you, Brad, and be like, oh, you just need to grow in your leadership, or you just need to be a better leader, or you just need to think differently, think like a leader, you're like, great. What does that actually translate to in my days? So we've fought really hard at Luminary Leadership Co. to take these principles that are tried and true, that really are the bridge from where you are to where you want to be, and make them tangible. So we have frameworks and tools and what we call playbooks that we bring to the table to our clients and our mastermind members or whomever we work with, sometimes through the podcast, to help them the same way you would implement like a funnel strategy that's super step-by-step and tangible, or a sales system, or whatever, like all these things that have become really systemized and you can touch them and you're like, great, I'm going to go do that thing. We have turned leadership into that. So when I meet the people that are at the brink of losing their marbles, usually the conversation is getting realigned for a minute first. It's very counterintuitive to them because they want to go faster to get through the hard time. And what I recommend is be a leader, like slow down enough to get a good vantage point, to see what you can't see when you're down in the weeds of your business. And our goal is to pull them from busy entrepreneur into visionary CEO, where they are building time into their schedule and they know what to do at that time. That's a key piece, to be in that visionary CEO seat, to make the right decisions, to get them up out of the mess and the crazy. Because I've been in seasons, I don't know if you can relate to this, but I've been in seasons where if you were to audit my calendar, it's not that packed. It's just like a lot of reactive crap. Like
Mhm.
I'm
Mhm.
responding to things and putting out fires. But it's not like I'm so busy or I have these big, heavy boulders I'm pushing up a mountain. And I've felt completely burnt out. And then I've been in seasons where we are like right now, like I'm halfway through a pregnancy, coming out of 3 months of like sick as a dog, like I am every time. I have a book coming out in the fall. I've been on podcast tour. We have new things launching. We just finalized this big business partnership with John Maxwell. Like we're doing all these awesome things. And I am like, I can take on more. My capacity is expand. I do not feel burnt out at all because I'm alive in my work and I'm in my sweet spot every day. I have team doing the things that I used to do when I was being reactive and two hands around a fire hose all day, every day. And I'm doing the things that actually drive the business forward as a CEO, that are propelling us in the right direction, that are very high leverage versus low leverage. And I feel like my capacity as a leader has expanded because of it, and I can take on more. So to me, burnout is usually an indicator that you're no longer in your sweet spot. In fact, probably less than 5% of your time is in your sweet spot. And we just need to slow you down long enough to recalibrate and get you on the right trajectory. And you'll be, it's not even that you have to do less necessarily, although you probably will do less. And you will very quickly go from, I'm talking like within days, go from burnt out to clear, inspired. When you're burnt out too, like you have no clarity, which means you have no
Mhm.
confidence, which means you're just surviving, and nothing good comes from those seasons. So that's the shift we're usually making. And we usually start with like, what's actually on your plate, what needs to be on your plate, and where are you really called to go? And how can we just make sure that we get you on the right trajectory? Because it's more about trajectory than specific like goals or KPIs to me. That's the important thing.
Well, I think you're going to laugh because last night, I was scrolling through TikTok of all things, right? And someone was on there and he's like, "Hey, if you've used ChatGPT for a long time, go on to ChatGPT because it learns you, right? It learns like the questions you're asking. It has an idea of what you're doing. Because I use ChatGPT every day, for work stuff, for my
Yep.
business podcasts, other things. And so the maybe you should do this too, Liz, if you haven't. But he says, go on and ask, what are my 10 blind spots, right? And
Oh, I like that.
yeah, it was fascinating. Just trust me. After this podcast, go do that. Anyone listening, go do
I'm
that.
gonna.
I go to ChatGPT last night, and it says, what are my 10 blind spots that I don't see as Brad Leavitt, right? And I'm telling you, like when it broke out, the 10 blind spots was fascinating. Like it like knows me. It's almost scary how well it knows me. And it was just very introspective to see these are what it can recognize. And the reason I bring out burnout, or the reason I bring this example, because one of probably like you and I don't feel burnout right at this point in my life, but our schedules are pretty busy. But it said, the problem with burnout is you start to accept pretty good decisions, kind of like you were speaking to, Liz.
Yep.
You lose creative sharpness, you drift from the visionary seat that you thrive in. And what happens is a lot of us, if we're focusing on the wrong task, if it's, I hear people that are like, well, I'm burnt out with social media, posting about my business. Like well, could you delegate that task, right? So you can still be creative and, but you're not doing the mundane commenting and posting. There's different things as you've spoken to where you're like, hey, as I've kind of taken some of these things off my plate where maybe I didn't, it's not that it's beneath you or you don't feel fulfilled. It's just there's probably a strength you have elsewhere. And if you're focusing on that and focusing on the business, and I know in listening to your podcast, you had spoken about kind of the example you gave where you're holding the fire extinguisher, the fire hose, that a lot of times when you're just putting out fires and being reactive, you're not able to really game plan of where you're going as a business. And so when you can do that, your schedule may be busier than it was before, but you feel more accomplished, you have more energy because you are actually doing what you know is benefiting you and the company in general.
Absolutely. And okay, so now I'm like, this is
Yeah.
morbid curiosity. What were some
Yeah.
of the
Yeah.
blind spots?
I'm glad you asked me. So it's interesting. So I'll just run through a couple of them. So um, one of it, like, is it operating too much without recovery? Right.
Oh,
Here's
yep,
here's one
relatable.
fascinating one. Yeah, it says avoiding conflict for the sake of smooth operations, and this one kind of hit home. I'll just read what it said. It said, in client or partner facing settings, you may occasionally default to diplomacy when more assertive boundary setting would protect your team, margins, or mental clarity. Um, and then another one, which is kind of interesting, it talked about how some members of your team probably need some more one-on-one or FaceTime with you, because they could be in burnout or they need that energy or maybe that direction or that, um, just that networking with you. And what's fascinating about that is that when a couple years ago, I'm part of like this builder mastermind, like a builder 20. So every twice a year we meet as, 20 people around the country in non-competitive markets, but like we evaluate each other's business. So they did a SWOT, right? So 5 of them come to my business and strength, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, right? So they interview my clients, my employees, um, architects, designers, everyone kind of in my network, and they come to me with this report, and they're like, "Okay, Brad, here's the strengths, here's the weaknesses, the opportunities, and what's threatening to your business, and here's right seat, right butt, like who's on the bus, right seat, all these different things." One of the biggest feedback items they had, they said, "Look, Brad, you tend to make decisions really quickly, and answering it for your team instead of maybe letting them stew on it and evaluate it and be there to support. And of course, ChatGPT almost word for word picks up what these same evaluators said. So it's a little, it's self-reflective in a way that maybe there's times, to your point, that you have to look at how can I innovate and rethink, my day to day, so that if I'm okay, that's fine. But maybe I have team members that aren't.
Yeah, that's a really insightful thing and something that I feel like I've learned the hard way because I've seen, like, you're probably similar to me, Brad, that you attract really loyal people,
Hmm.
which is a huge blessing, right? Like, you want team members that are loyal to you and loyal to the mission. But what loyal people do is they will silence their stress
Hmm.
or their burnout on your behalf because they're so loyal. And you can, especially if you're like a go, go, go leader, which many of the people I work with are, you can go too many months and, God forbid, too many years without really recognizing that that person is functioning from a place of strong arming and not like overflow and feeling filled up and having what they need, whether it be the right systems and you've equipped them well, or even just your ear to be like, we're just recognizing like, hey, we're in a crazy season, aren't we? Like, how are you doing with that? Hey, you've been taking a lot extra onto your plate. Why don't you take this week to just work a couple days this week, and like, here's a gift certificate, go do something fun with your family. Like, you sometimes have to really pour into them intentionally, and it's really easy not on purpose. The same reason we take our spouse for granted. They're right there, they're loyal, they're not going anywhere, and it's easy to just be like, well, I have all these people that are paying me that could go somewhere and I need their money, so I'm going to give them my best first, and then you'll get what's left. So I think that's an important thing for team, and something I've really had to like build into my thinking as a leader, of like, team actually comes first. A healthy team creates a healthy organization, which creates, the ripple effect that we all really want as business owners.
It's so funny you say that, because in that valuation, they spoke about the loyalty, right, of my team, and probably like you have. And going back to the chat GPT, it's funny that we're diving into this here on the episode, as I just went through this last night. But it says high performers often misjudge how much autonomy or inspiration others need. Your team or collaborators may need more coaching, feedback, or encouragement than you may assume. And it's to
Mm-hmm.
that point that you create this loyalty, whether to the brand or to you as a person. And without, the reality is, as I'm sure you would have confidence to speak about, Liz, is that, um, in a way, you've probably through your network and experience, you've found ways to deal with the stress, deal with, the things that come up on a day to day basis. The reality is, I look at my team in construction. It's a very difficult thing. I think what's really tough about leadership as a superintendent is there's this fine balance to the ones that are in the field of, you have to be very technical, right? At the
Yep.
same time, you have to be soft in a way to not, the trades that we have, the trade partners, to not offend them. But at the same time, you have to be, you have to really like push on them, right? You have to push on schedules and timelines and showing up. And so there's this fine balance between being really tough and then still being soft, and it takes a toll. I've seen where it can take a toll. I remember being in the field, and I'm sure where you've had layers of people in your organization or even those that you're coaching, is that sometimes we forget what it's like, that day to day
Mm-hmm.
struggle, right? Of balancing and trying to do what you can for the benefit of the business.
Yeah, and our poor team members are subject to our stressors and realities too. Like, being in a first trimester of pregnancy for me is always just like brutal. I mean, I was in these negotiations with a bunch of like
Oh.
dudes, and I'm like, "Oh no, my camera's not working." And I'm like, shut my camera to throw up in a trash can and pop back on and be like, "Okay." Like, my team then gets the the version of me where I'm exhausted and I'm
Right.
drained and I'm stressed, and so they are subject to our leadership, which is ebbing and flowing because we're human. So I think open lines of communication is really key. One thing that I was always taught, one of my uncles was always like, if you lead with love, then it and you always do the right thing, it will always work out. And sometimes leading with love and doing the right thing is humbling yourself enough to be like, Man, I was total B last week. I'm so sorry. Like, did you guys feel that? I felt it. I'd like to recalibrate with you guys. What do you need? Just having those touch points. And because I can just be like so hyper focused on my sweet spot and the things that I want to be doing that are growing the business, I actually have to, like a dope, build into my schedule these touch points, because otherwise I could just gloss right over them. The same way I have to put date night on my calendar. I wish I was the type that didn't, or like block, tomorrow's my son's birthday. So my team knew, like, hey, we're blocking Liz's schedule and I'm taking him out in the morning and we're going on a little date. But it's just like you have to use the tools that are going to help you be better in your leadership, because your team gets the downstream effect, just like your family often does, of like the fluctuations and the stressors that we just naturally feel when we're running a business. They aren't always going to fully understand the pressure we're under, and we're not always going to fully understand like what it's like being in the trenches the way they are. But when you open the lines of communication both ways, it brings you as close to understanding as humanly possible.
It's incredible. I mean, thinking of, you personally, Liz, why did you start Luminary Leadership? You've had leadership opportunities. How's that inspired the mission? I mean, speak to us a little bit about, what you do.
Uh, so it's funny because my mom is a really big influence in my life. She's more than she's an incredible businesswoman. Like, if I were to read you the scroll of things that I had to yank out of her, I never even knew. I had to ask employees like all these different merits she's gotten over the years, and she's been president of the board of banks and of different boards and all these different things. But she would never say it. She's super humble, but she's guided me a ton in business, but also a ton in, being a mother and just how I treat people and how I lead. And we were talking and reflecting because she came out to my event, because we just moved back to New Hampshire, where I'm from, God's country, and I'm right down the road from my mom. So it's nice that she can pop into these events and share her wisdom with my members. And one thing she was saying, she's like, it's so funny, like reflecting back, I always wondered like what the heck you were going to do, because I'd watch you and you were never just kind of hell bent on anything. Like, you were never all in. You played sports and you did great, but like I could tell you weren't really passionate about certain things, or in school, like you were bored, you didn't really care. And then you broke into like the career world of, I was in corporate marketing, and like you clearly hated it. So I always wondered, like, maybe she'll just kind of be one of those average people, or maybe she'll just be like a really great mom someday. And she's like, and then you shifted into leadership and leading others in business. And it was like, I saw a different version of you come alive. And I think that's the thing we're all seeking. I think the mistake we make is we think that when we find our thing, or the thing that like we feel like God's calling us to, at least in this season of life, because it is subject to change, different seasons have different callings on your heart, that it's just going to then be easy from that point on. I think it's like the moment you pick up the boulder and put it on your back. It's like, no, now it gets hard, but it's light in the sense that it is aligned and meant for you. So for me, I started my career in entrepreneurship 13 years ago, more so like focused around marketing and business scaling. And first, in fact, my very first podcast was called Scaling Up, and it was all business strategy. And about 5 years in, I realized, oh my gosh, without exception, every single entrepreneur and founder I'm working with at some point hits their ceiling, and that ceiling is them. And I am doing them a disservice by just giving them the strategies that are helping their bottom line. Like, we're seeing, record-breaking numbers in their businesses, but it's coming at the expense of their marriage or their quality of life, or they no longer even like what they do anymore and they're questioning everything, or their health is deteriorating. So that was around when I started to really embrace like, oh, who you become is really the bridge to where you get to go. And how do we unlock and scale the leader so that the business more naturally unlocks and scales, versus how do we strategize the perfect way to grow and 10x your business? No, how do we unlock you so that the growth of your business is just natural overflow of you as a leader? And you've seen that before, right? Like, you've just seen the people where you're like, they never stop growing. Their businesses is killing it. They seem so alive in what they do. They're really passionate. They seem to have a healthy, you never really know, but they seem to have a healthy family life. They have a strong faith, like all these things. It's because they've really identified, like, who do I need to become to carry this cross? And so that was where my energy shifted. I still do a ton of business strategy. It's a major part of it, but I'll never do it without the other side of the coin, right? Like we're always going to talk about the elements of who they need to be in order to leverage that strategy properly so it actually works. So I am a very much a like, probably too much so sometimes. I build the plane as I'm flying it. Like I'm like, oh, I've already leapt off the cliff. I guess I'm going to need something that like propels me through the air, or else I'm going to fall. So I jump too early. I go really fast. And that's Luminary was just like an evolution, just learning and paying attention in really painful seasons of life where I was like, what am I doing? Curled up in the fetal position, am I a failure? Will this all fall apart? And from those moments, seeing what was really next for me and then embracing it and then putting the people around me who are going to help me get there, because I always believe that, your big next or whatever you're called into next is a team sport. God is the co-captain, and family and team and the right tribe, the right clients around you. And that's how you win, is when you're really like allowing that ripple effect to go so far beyond you. It's when it becomes a lot bigger than you.
It's fascinating how you can see your business change, right? The pivot to what you started to, you realize that you mentioned that, instead of maybe just profitability or scale, it's like, what do people want to become?
Yeah.
How do you find your clients now? Like, from a marketing perspective, as you built that network, how do you, how has it expanded over the years?
Well, I've, it's been I think one of the best ways I've heard it put was one of my clients years ago was like, you're kind of like the Hitch of leadership, like the movie Hitch. You know how he just is
Yeah,
kind of like
yeah,
this
yeah.
business card. It's just a black business card. Like you never really know who he is, but he comes in and he fixes everything and he gets them where they want to be. Like that's what I did for years. So it was all very referral based, and we thrived on that. As I'm teaching all these other people like how to grow these big networks and funnels and book launches and all these things. So over the last handful of years, our podcast has brought in a lot of people.
Mhm.
And now once begrudgingly, and now I've embraced things like this of just being willing to just share my story and my message
Yeah.
on other people's
Mhm.
shows, or I speak often in other people's groups or masterminds or programs to just really serve where I can. So that's been a big way. And then we also are finally getting a little bit more, like we just building up our YouTube channel is something I've successfully avoided for many years, things like that. So, practicing what we've been preaching for so long versus just being like this kind of back pocket secret for our clients and their networks.
I love that. And it's true. There's so much value to expanding outside your normal network, right? And what that does. Well, you've been so gracious with the time. Just a few last things. What keeps you up at night?
Well, let me get the scroll and tell
Yeah.
you. I would say the number one thing that keeps me up at night is fear around something happened in my family. Like we had a year ago, a little over a year ago, I was pregnant with our fifth baby, and at 17 weeks, we found out he no longer had a heartbeat after everything
Mm.
had been just fine. Like I had just heard his heartbeat 2 weeks before, and I delivered him and immediately started hemorrhaging, and I ultimately ended up losing almost 60% of my blood volume, which around
Oh my
40%
God.
is catastrophic. So there were many miracles in that hospital that day. And obviously, I lived to tell the tale and had a massive blood transfusion and a life saving surgery. And
Mm.
that changed everything for me. It changed
Mm.
everything for us as a family. When I came to, I remember saying to my husband in the hospital room, I don't know if it was the next day or the day after, like, I am never doing something ever again that isn't in alignment with what God's calling us to do, whether it be in my business, in our home, how we raise our children, in our marriage. Like, I'm just done. This is it. I have no idea if I have a tomorrow, so I'm not gonna squander today. And that has really shifted things for us. But what it also did was made me like intimately aware of my mortality and the mortality of those around us. So it's not like this crippling thing that I walk around that I'm afraid I'm going to die or I'm afraid my kids are going to die. But like, for example, I have a 2-year-old, so she will run into something or like just be a total spaz. And then my brain at 3 a.m. will play out all the ways that could have been so much worse. So usually number one is that. And I would say number two is what keeps me up at night is the good stuff. Like I am such an innovator in my mind and an iterator. Like I am something that we just created or like what we just wrote in a chapter of the book or whatever. 2, 3 a.m. I'm like, oh, this is how I'm going to tweak that, or this is how I'm going to make that better. So I'm constantly coming up with ideas. So I had to go I keep a notebook by my bed, which is hysterical. If anyone read it, they'd think I was drunk or had a stroke because I'm blind as a bat. I wear contacts, but in the middle of the night, obviously I don't. And it's pitch black and I don't keep my phone by my bed. So I have a notebook, but like in the morning, I don't want to turn a light on and wake my husband. I have to get these thoughts out of my head so I can sleep. But when I write, it's like going up and down and crossed over because I can't see anything. But all of my best ideas come in the middle of the night and keep me up. So those are the two things that like rob me of sleep when it's not a baby crying. But yeah, we'll be in that stage again shortly.
Wow, that's incredible. I mean, thank you for sharing. That's such a personal thing. It's amazing how your perspective changes. So, Liz, I can't thank you enough. I mean, this hour went by too fast for me, and your experience. I'm so glad our audience got to hear about more about you. So, for those listening, how can they find you? So that they can be part of this amazing network you have and learn more about some of the events that you do.
Probably one of the best places where you're going to get the most from me is over on our podcast, Your Big Next. So come over and subscribe. I talk a lot about these things, but in more depth, and usually with resources to help support you. And one of the things I'd love to share with your audience, if they come and find me on Instagram, I'm just at Liz Hartke. And they just DM me the word template, I'll send them my Visionary CEO template just as a gift. And that breaks down a lot of the stuff that I was talking about today of just like the first step is just slowing down for like if you're feeling like that pressure, or you're in a pressure cooker and you're really stressed and overwhelmed and on the brink of burnout, it's a great way to just get the perspective of like, well, where should my time be going? Like, where am I hemorrhaging my time and where is there opportunity for me to gain back time and focus on the things that are going to move the needle versus the putting out the fires and the reacting. So I'm happy to share that as well. But those are probably the two best places, or they can come find me on our website at luminaryleadershipco.com.
Well, Liz, you've been incredible. Thank you so much for making time with your busy schedule. We appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. This was such a joy.
If you get value from the show, please support us by giving a 5-star rating and review on whatever platform you listen to. And I also have a favor to ask. We've had some incredible guests that come on and share their wisdom, their knowledge about their business. So if you have friends or family members that could benefit from those episodes, please share it with them, as well as any other business owners that you're networking with that could get value from the podcast or certain episodes. Please share those as well. Again, subscribe, make sure you're following. Any questions that you have, topics. We've had listeners reach out about certain guests that we should have on the show. Again, brad.l@aftconstruction.com. Email me for topics to address, guests that we should have on, and even if you think you'd be a great guest for the show. So again, thank you for all your support, and we'll see you next time.